University in Chicago, spoke this morning. Our students were very engaged in her conversation on gender and sexuality, and I know that this lecture will be very engaging as well. Susan Ross is Professor of Theology at Loyola University in Chicago. She received her BA from Manhattanville College, which is run by the Religious of the Sacred Heart. And I told her that we are on sacred ground here, at least Sacred Heart ground. As we all know, Loon Mountain was run by the Religious of the Sacred Heart. And her MA and PhD are from the University of Chicago. She is the author of Extravagant Affections, a Feminist Sacramental Theology, which our bookstore was kind enough to just bring over a copy right here. I have also the copy from the library, but the cover isn't as nice as this one. And this book won the College Theology Society's Book of the Year Award in 1999. She also has co-edited a book entitled Broken and Whole, Essays on Religion and the Body, and we have that from the library as well. And has published over 75 articles and reviews on such subjects as sacramental theology, feminist ethics, sexuality, and theological aesthetics. She is currently at work on a new book on women, beauty, and justice. She has served as the director of Women's Studies program at Loyola University and on the boards of the Catholic Theological Society of America, the College Theology Society, and the Society of Christian Ethics. And currently she serves on the editorial board of Concilium, which is an international theological journal published in several languages. And next year she'll be giving the Magdalena Lecture in Spirituality. The topic of today's talk is Can God Be a Bride? Which is the title of an article which appeared, was it November? November in America magazine. Can God Be a Bride? Women in the Catholic Church. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Susan Ross.
Thank you very much for coming out this afternoon. And it's really nice to be in a place that not only I feel kind of connected to in a way, the whole Sacred Heart tradition. I saw a picture of Montier down the hall. Maybe not all of you know about Montier, but she was kind of, because I not only went to a Sacred Heart College, I went to a Sacred Heart High School. And it's also great to see old friends, Jim Weiser, Teresa, Rachel Hatch, and others. So thanks very much for coming out this afternoon. Can you hear me if I talk like this? Okay. Maybe a little closer to the mic. Okay. Well, I don't go over the time. Oh, there's a nice clock up there, too. Last summer, the Vatican issued a statement on women in the church, and perhaps some of you here read it, perhaps have read about it. It's readily available on the web. And shortly after the document was issued, I received an email from this journalist in India who had read actually an article that I'd written. Reputation, and he wanted to do an e-interview. It was one of the first I've done. And so I finished writing this interview, which was kind of, he'd send me the questions and I'd write the answers back. And then my husband suggested that he said, you better write this up, and write up the gist of this article. So I did. And America magazine published it. And so it ultimately led to my being invited here. So all this is a roundabout way of saying I think I should thank the Vatican for this occasion. Since I might not have been inspired to sit down and gather my thoughts the way that I did, I probably would have just kind of sat there and said, darn it, or worse. So by asking, can God be a bride, I'm of course asking a much larger question. How do we talk about God, about marriage, about women and men? And if we were to think of God in bridal terms, what does this mean? So I'd like to approach this question indirectly a little and come back to this particular issue after we spend a little bit of time considering women's contributions to the church. Now, as we all know, women have been essential to the church's ministry for its entire existence. And no one, not even the Pope, and not even the people to the right of the Pope, and believe me, there are people to the right of the Pope, would doubt this. And women have, since the church's infancy, not only given birth to many Christians, fed them, educated them, sent them forth, But women have also been evangelists, theologians, mystics, prophets, missionaries, nurses, teachers, saints, martyrs, you name it. So as much as one can be critical of the institutional church for its treatment of women, as many of my students are, a more careful reading of the church's history renders a very complex story. Women are included in the stories of Jesus, are mentioned in the letters of Paul, as some of the early evangelists, and many witnessed to their faith in the persecutions of the Roman Empire. Women's work was essential to the early church, as the household was, for the first few centuries, the main place of worship and education. It's still exactly unclear what women's role in the church's worship was, but we do know that women were certainly there, if only to be admonished for not covering their heads or for speaking up too much. In fact, a couple of very interesting books have been written in the last decade or so. I'm thinking of Teresa Berger, who is a liturgical theologian at Duke, about the role of women in the church's worship life in its early years. But we have no doubt of women's contributions, limited as they were by social custom, as well as theological pre- and proscriptions. Now, as the church grew, women found new opportunities in religious life as well as married life, even though in some cases, taking vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience meant becoming male, to use the unfortunate language of the time. Women had opportunities to become educated, religious leaders, abbesses, confessors, preachers. I think of, for example, Hildegard of Bingen. Still many, including Hildegard, continued to see their femaleness as something lesser than male, a kind of handicap. Some women used this status to see themselves as closer to Christ's humanity, and of course were closer to Christ's divinity, and their spirituality and witness continue to inspire many today. And the work of Carolyn Walker Bynum on medieval women's religious practices, particularly around food, has helped to open up new and exciting areas of study. Now, in all of these situations, women shared their many gifts with the church. Often these gifts were welcomed. I think, for example, one doesn't think of this as a real contribution to the church, but I think of the needlework that over the centuries has graced the vestments, altar cloths, kneelers, and tapestries. And this magnificent needlework has in fact been a ministry to the church, as the many exhibitions of great religious art bear witness. And think of the thankless and unacknowledged work of the women who have laundered and repaired the altar cloths. Now, since my mother was an avid needleworker, I have a special appreciation for the intricate, sometimes tedious, and often delicate work that this involves. Consider, too, the work that has been done in bearing and raising the children who have become ministers of the church. But as we all know, women have done a great deal more than bear children and do needlework, important as both tasks are. And since one of my other theological interests is the place of beauty in religious life, I'm not one to dismiss beautiful needlework as a mere trifle. Perhaps some of you have seen the note card or t-shirt, and unfortunately I forgot mine. I'm not to bring it along. It portrays a group of women at a table that looks rather intentionally like the Last Supper. And there's a little caption underneath it that says women's work. Underneath the picture are these words, and in case you've not seen it, I'll just read off the names of those portrayed at this table. Dorothy Day, Aung San Suu Kyi, Theo Bowman, Ada Ford, Catherine of Siena, Rigoberto Menchú, Mary Luke Tobin, Mary of Nazareth, Priscilla, Ruth Fitzpatrick, Edith Stein, Teresa of Avila. Some of these women are living, like Ruth, I'm getting all the names coming in, Ruth Fitzpatrick, Rigoberto Menchú, Aung San Suu Kyi. Some are long gone and some ought still to be with us, like Ada Ford. And I wear my t-shirt proudly. I think this picture says a great deal about why much of women's work remains, in some ways, what I'll call an unopened gift to the church. And what's characteristic of all these women, I submit, is that they all spoke the truth to power. And sometimes they suffered terrible consequences for this. And they all lived lives that challenged the traditional image of women presented by the official church. Now, this may at first sound surprising since some of these women have in fact been canonized. Catherine, Teresa, Edith. To say that Mary of Nazareth has been canonized is an understatement, although Elizabeth Johnson would have us know that Mary needs to come down from her pedestal and take her place among the communion of saints.